You've watched the news accounts. You've read the headlines. This is history in the making. Headlines that read, "Airport pandemonium as people scramble to fly out of Egypt." Another major headline, "Fighter jets over Cairo." And how about this one? "Muslim Brotherhood trying to form a unity government with Mohammed el-Baradei." U.S. losing credibility day by day. The other glaring headline, 100 plus dead, 2,000 injured. Another one, anger starting to focus on Israel and the United States. And of course, this all started with, conditions in Egypt, poverty. And how about this one? Egyptian looters destroy 2,000-year-old mummies. What is happening in Egypt is certainly historic, and it's obvious it is also potentially catastrophic for global events. For those of us that embrace biblical truth, for those of us who believe in Bible prophecy, the question is, could these events playing out in Egypt be setting the stage for the political alignments that will exist before the return of Jesus Christ? The chaos in Egypt and the uncertainty it creates throughout the Middle East may well be positioning our world for the climax of human history. First of all, this crisis in Egypt makes peace in the Middle East all the more urgent. If a moderate Islamic state like Egypt is replaced with the radical Islamic elements such as the Muslim Brotherhood, tensions in the Middle East will only increase. And certainly Israel will find herself all the more under the pressure of having to respond to the tension that surrounds her. If the instability in Egypt spills over into Jordan, which it could, Israel will find herself completely surrounded by hostile nations. The book of Daniel, chapter 9, verse 27, tells us that there will be a peace agreement in the Middle East between Israel and her neighbors. This begins the 7-year countdown to the return of Jesus Christ. This instability in Egypt makes the need for just such a peace agreement all the more critical. Secondly, we know that the United States is not clearly identified in the end-time scenario. Despite the fact that we are the global power, we are not seen in the closing chapters of the book of the Revelation. We are not seen in that 7-year period. Therefore, one looks at what's taking place in Egypt and the potential impact of events playing out in Egypt. It could well be that these will further diminish the United States as an economic power, especially, by the way, if the oil supply is cut off. We would be diminished as an economic power and as a key player in the Middle East. More than ever, we'll see this area of the world, the Middle East, looking to the EU for intervention. A third point to consider, events of this magnitude, and this is huge, heighten the need that people feel for a world leader who will come on the scene and bring peace and prosperity to all nations. In a word, cataclysmic events of this magnitude set the stage for the arrival of the Antichrist. One day, a global leader will emerge. The Bible tells us this. And he is described in Daniel chapter 11, beginning in verse 36. And it reads this way, "The king," this is the Antichrist, "will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place. He will show no regard for the gods of his ancestors, or for the one desired by women, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all." When we look at this, we see the characterization of the Antichrist. He's going to do whatever he wants. He's going to magnify himself above God. Whatever his nationality, whatever his background, he is going to reject the God of his ancestors. It appears he's going to embrace a new God. It says he will have no regard for the gods of his ancestors or for the one desired by women. That phrase is difficult. Some suggest that he's talking about the desire of Hebrew women to one day bear the Messiah, as the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent. Or it could possibly be that he comes out of a homosexual background. We see a parallel to Daniel. Daniel written some 500 years before the birth of Christ. But we read in Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, the second letter, don't let anyone deceive you, chapter 2 and verse 3. Don't let anyone deceive you in any way, for that day, the day of the Lord, will not come until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness, this is the same person, is revealed, the man doomed to destruction. He will oppose and will exalt himself over everything that is called God or is worshipped, so that he sets himself up in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. During this 7-year period, from the peace agreement to the return of Jesus Christ, we find at the midpoint the abomination which causes desolation, spoken of by the prophet Daniel. This Antichrist is eventually going to make his way to Jerusalem, to the Temple Mount, into the actual rebuilt temple, and there he is going to desecrate it, declaring himself ultimately as God. Now Daniel's description continues in verse 38 of chapter 11. Instead of them, he will honor a god of fortresses. He is going to be a military political powerhouse. A god unknown to his ancestors he will honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. As the Antichrist is able to defeat nations, he is going to offer up the bounty of his victories to his god. He will attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign god and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. This man is energized by Satan. So you stop and say, what does this have to do with Egypt? Well, what we find in verse 40 of this very same chapter, it says, at the time of the end, when the Antichrist is being positioned for this final chapter of human history as we know it, as we get closer and closer to the Battle of Armageddon, when these nations that today hate Israel are converging on Israel, we read, at the time of the end, the king of the south will engage him in battle, and the king of the north will storm out against him with chariots and with a great fleet of ships. He will invade many countries, sweep through them like a flood. In other words, the nation to the north, the king of the north, Syria, as well as the king of the south, Egypt, will go to battle against the Antichrist. And it says in verse 41, but he also will invade the beautiful land. That's the land of Israel. And then we discover, as we continue in verse 42, he will extend his power over many countries. Egypt, this is the scriptures now, Egypt will not escape. He will gain control of the treasures of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt, with the Libyans and Cushites in submission. In other words, what we are seeing today, the political alignment and the potential for growing hostility against Israel, sets the stage for the Antichrist to enter into the peace agreement with Israel. And then when Israel is being afflicted by her neighbors, the Antichrist, in deference to that peace agreement, then comes on the scene and goes to battle against Syria to the north and then against Egypt to the south. And then it says, verse 45, his royal tents between the seas at the beautiful holy mountain. The holy mountain. He will actually, at this point, establish himself right there at the Temple Mount. But keep this in mind, the Word of God, the sovereignty of God, and God giving us just the confidence we can have that he's going to deal with this, because it then says, yet he, the Antichrist, the one who will sway the nations, the one who will demand the worship of all people, he will come to his end, and no one will help him.